On this episode, did you ever have any interaction with him, engagement? Do you ever know where maybe he stood on this whole thing?
Larry Haber's in it. Larry Haber's been in, I think, all of his time travel documentaries. And so I'm sure they're friends to an extent.
He does claim that he has other photos of it, but to the best of my knowledge, he's never made that public.
He was also in the suspect list. I never really saw any evidence that sort of alluded to the fact that he really was a suspect outside of just a big fan.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Submitted for your consideration. A name lost to time, but not forgotten. John Titor, a self-proclaimed time traveler who appeared on internet forums in the early 2000s, bringing tales of civil war, parallel worlds, and an IBM computer with secrets no one was supposed to know. Was he a prophet, a prankster, or something far stranger? Tonight, we're joined by a man who spent over a decade pulling at the threads of this mystery. John Hughston, better known as Razimus, dedicated 12 years to dissecting the legend, hunting for handwriting in the shadows, and following digital breadcrumbs through cyberspace. What he found wasn't a time machine, but a name, a man he believes was behind it all. So pour yourself something strong, because we are about to pull back the layers on one of the internet's greatest conspiracies. This is the unraveling of John Titor and the hoax hunter who claims to have cracked the code. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you are tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Skwarek, here, as always, with my... Well, I used the big A words the last time. What did I say the last time, Mr. Phillips?
I don't know, but let's go with
Unapologetically,
esteemed.
Mr. Phillips.
Let's go with esteemed co-host.
Well, I say esteemed all the time, but my
I know, I
esteemed
like it.
co-host, Mr. Phillips, we're back again. And we're here with John Hughston. Welcome to Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I
Cheers,
appreciate
fellas.
it. I guess I do have to take my obligatory sip here, huh?
Let's go. It is cocktails and conspiracies.
It is Cocktails and Conspiracies. I guess that the cocktail part has to kind of fall in line with the conspiracy part here. So this is a subject that if you've been listening to this show for any amounts of time, you've heard Tim and I talk quite a bit, that it's one of our favorite conspiracy series, probably one of the ones that like kind of launched us into the whole realm of conspiracies and mysteries, particularly on the internet. We always called him John Titor. We learned more recently it's John Titor. And so for the duration of this podcast, we probably will be jumping back and forth, whether intentionally or not.
He's Titor.
But it's one of our favorites. We've covered him in a dedicated episode, and we've touched on him in a time travel episode previously. But we really never went down the rabbit hole of who might be behind it. And that's kind of where we landed today, Mr. Phillips. We found through a lot of research, Mr. John Hughston over here. And John, you've done quite a bit of research over a long period of time. There's some YouTube channels out there with a ton of video information. At what point did you discover the story of John Titor?
I first read about it. Well, to be honest, if you want to know, I'm a huge Art Bell fan. So
Yep.
I was listening in 1998 when Art Bell got that fax from that time traveler.
Wow.
Really?
That's the first I accidentally heard about it, but he didn't have a name back then. He was just an anonymous faxer. So I didn't know until the first time I read about the John Titor saga was in 2003, like after he stopped posting, but
Right.
not too long after he stopped posting about 2001. So about 2 years later, it started to blow up, and I first read about it, and then people tied the 1998 fax to him. And I was like, I remember that. And so I was interested, and so I wanted to learn more about it. And so I read through all of it. And, for years I wanted there's a challenge on the different time travel websites, the forums. No one can find his identity. It's impossible. We've already tried for years. And so I took that as a challenge. I thought I could find him, So I really dug into it and tried every method possible. And I do believe I found the true identity. And I think the guy's reluctant because I think it was just a prank, but it was a pretty elaborate prank if it was a prank. I mean, very elaborate, you know.
An elaborate prank that went on for years too. So if it is a prank, I mean the extent that you would have had to have gone through, it just seems. I'm not saying that it's not a prank, but it just seems like extensive, right? Like I'm not. It's always surprised me that somebody hasn't tried to take more credit for it with like some sort of degree of evidence. You said you heard him originally on Art Bell. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, was this just in the middle of a show, or was Art like queued up?
It was in the middle of a show. Art Bell had a time traveler caller line where people could call in, and he also had a fax line that nobody ever faxed him ever. So this is like the first time travel fax he ever received ever, as far as I know. Because, you know, even back in 98, most people didn't have a fax machine and faxed. And so Art Bell starts getting these faxes, and the topic of the day, a lot of people were talking about Y2K. So in 98, everyone's talking about the Y2K bug. Is it going to be disastrous or no big deal? Nobody knew. It was a big question mark at the time. And so Art Bell gets this fax, supposedly from a time traveler that knows what happens with the Y2K bug. And that's the connection between John Titor. Everyone says that's the crux of his story. He went back to correct the Y2K bug. So there are little details here and there in the fax which hints that it had to be John Titor. It had to be the same guy.
See, I've always kind of operated under the assumption that when he started posting on the forums that he took credit for the fax on Art Bell. Like there was a direct correlation between the two. That wasn't the case, though, you're saying?
I mean, I would have to read through it again. It's hard to want to read through it 2 or 3 times when you've already read through it.
Yeah, and there's a lot.
10,000 times.
Yeah.
Like someone interviewed me last year, and they assumed I keep up on this every day and just still research it to this day. But my last video on John Titor was like 7 years ago.
Right,
so,
right.
You know, I don't keep up to it from day to day. I consider it a case closed to an extent. I mean, there's still more research and more proof that can come out.
Of course.
I think my side is done. I'm done researching it personally. I've moved on. But I'm happy to talk about it. I can't remember if John Titor directly answered that, but he may or may not have. I'm not 100%. Sure.
John, I'll tell you what, Shane and I go through the same thing all the time, right? I can't tell you how many times I have friends or family that'll say, hey, you know, I watched such and such episode, and it might have been like 5 months ago, like, and want me to like deep dive on it, and I'm like, oh my god, man, I'm like, that was 40 episodes ago. I'm like, I can tell you the gist, but I don't know if I give you a deep dive, so I empathize with you on that, buddy.
Yeah.
It was funny because we talked about this in a recording we did last week. Particularly, it's because about 2 weeks ago, as the time we're recording this right now, we did an interview on Richard Serrett's podcast, and it was more of a synopsis of a lot of other episodes we did and just sort of the approach we're taking on here. And Tim and I talked afterwards, like Richard really went deep into a lot of like the depths of all the subjects that we were bringing up, and like. Although after listening to the podcast, felt like we handled it really well. At the time, I had told Tim right after, I'm like, man, like I was not prepared to deep dive on each of these topics so deeply because like you, John, like we did our research, we got to the point where we wanted to get to, and we moved on to kind of the next thing in life. And it's not that most of these topics, particularly with the whole Titor story, it's not like there's any new information really coming out. We've passed all of the marquee dates. And, you know, I have my own personal theories about those dates of like if you shifted them about 18 years, 20 years, like a lot of those could still be applicable, but there's no nuclear war. There's, there's no mass extinction events. There's none of those things have come to fruition. So I think for the most part to expect anybody at this point to really pull that out with 100% recall is probably a pretty ambitious demand, but nonetheless, we're going to try to tap into to what you do remember. As we went through some of your videos, it was funny because we talked about that too. Tim had messaged me. He's like, are you sure this is the right one? It looks like it's from like years ago now. I'm like, yeah no, it definitely is. Definitely is. But as you said, John, there's not a lot probably changed. And having gone through the materials, it's a pretty compelling case. Like if you were sitting in a courtroom and slapping that up on the judge's desk, I'm not sure how much further you can go without an admittance from said person. But before we get there, I want to kind of go back to, your initial acceptance of the challenge to figure out where he was. There was something that you said in one of your videos to the extent of at one point you came out and said that you were John Titor. And the goal of that was to try to get the real John Titor to come out and say, no, that's not him. It's actually me. He's just trying to take credit for it. And I actually thought that was a pretty ingenious and something I really likened to and probably would have tried to do myself at some point is when somebody creates such a wave out there with anything, right? Whether it's sports or whether it's just a new creation or invention or trying to set this this tall tale on the internet, they're going to want some degree of credit at some point. If somebody else takes that credit, it's a great way to get them out of hiding. How deep were you into your investigations at that point before you decided, you know what, like I'm just going to do this and see what happens?
Well, I remember the first time I said I was John Titor was on the Back to the Future forums. I just said it jokingly. I wanted the Back to the Future fans to get interested in this topic because it's a different realm of time travel fiction, if you will, or perhaps reality. I mean, there's definitely fans to both Back to the Future and John Titor, and I admitted, I made that up, and I must have made a video where I said that, but I can't remember. I can't remember that video.
Did you create like a pseudonym on that forum, or did you post it using your whatever tag you had?
I posted it as Razimus, Razimus. And I admitted, I'm just joking. But I do have a friend who said he got all the patents for John Titor a couple years ago. He said he got the worldwide patents, and he said the reason he bought them is to try to get the original guy to come out and say, hey, I own that.
Right.
And he said, and this guy got the patents easily 7 years ago. And he said they've never come forward and they don't care. They don't care about the copyrights and trademarks and not patents, but copyrights and trademarks specifically.
Right.
He said he got the radio one, the TV one, the movie one. He got all the specific different copyrights and trademarks. And
Wow.
they never came forward. No one ever cared. So that's interesting.
That's really interesting considering, and we're going to get to this later on, but my theory as to who John Titor really was and to what the motives were behind that, I'm interested, or I find that very interesting, rather, that the quote-unquote real John Titor, who you'll disclose in a little while, didn't come forward when somebody else had the copyrights.
Yeah, he did a deep dive, and I wish I remember his name. He's from overseas. and at first he didn't like my videos, and then he became a fan, I guess. And then he said, here's what I found, and he said the rights for the movie were sold for $0.
Wow.
Which is interesting. That's like a friend giving it to someone. So
Yeah.
it wasn't really sold. It was given to perhaps a friend or family member. I don't know, but nothing ever happened of that except for Larry Haber did have a little previews, that little short movie on his YouTube. So he
Right.
was trying to, I think, get that in Hollywood to get Hollywood interested.
Start
Hollywood's
something, yeah.
most interested when they see an example of a movie. They like to see a little trailer, even if it's just a test little trailer. And nothing ever happened of it, but he was pretty professional. They put a lot of, you could tell, they hired an actor. They built a prop, a totally different prop, not the original one, but they put effort into it. So I think that was Larry's goal to an extent. And you said, how do they connect the Habers to Titor? Well, Larry Haber has always been the official lawyer and spokesperson, at least on Coast to Coast AM and different shows like that, representing John Titor. And so that's, I could see how that would be questionable for someone would say maybe he just did that on his own, but there's a lot of connections. The book was published and Larry plugged the book, that short-run book, the really short-run book. And there's different things. It continued with the mother of John Titor, and all kinds of strange stuff came out. I don't know.
Yeah, that got weird.
Yeah.
That's a really weird part of the saga. But John, to your point, right? And now that we've kind of already talked about it, and I'm not spoiling anything, a big part of the suspicion for the Haber family being involved in the Titor story was, case in point, they were trying to make money off of this in some way, shape, or form, right? Most notably through Hollywood and potentially some kind of a movie deal or a series. And so I find it very interesting that they didn't step up or even allowed the copyrights to be purchased by somebody else.
Yeah, I think Larry saw the interest wasn't the best, and I think the original guy who started it, he has the successful formula for when a hoax goes viral, and that formula is never coming forward and admitting you did it. That's the formula. There are actually a number of hoaxes, and the most successful ones, the original inventor of the hoax never comes forward. For example, the Necronomicon, the Simon Necronomicon. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that was a late 70s hoax of a book, and written by Simon, an anonymous guy named Simon. And to this day, people think it's Peter Lavenda or this person or that person. But officially, the author of this Necronomicon, which was part of the Satanic Panic of the 80s, I don't know if you know this, but a bunch of kids bought this Necronomicon, and they're like performing rituals in this Necronomicon. And the book was supposedly translated from an ancient manuscript, but the ancient manuscript has never existed. You could tell by the writing it's not from an ancient manuscript. It's from a modern author writing it out and making stuff up. But it's still well done to an extent.
Right.
Well done enough to trick people into thinking it's ancient. And to this day, ghost hunters and occultists and who knows, they read from it, they use it, and the original guy has never come forward. So I think that even though it's a totally separate subject, it's similar to John Titor in the fact that the guy never came forward, and it's gone into extreme fame. It's blown up into a huge thing, and it's bigger than it. It can't be taken out. Except for, I think, John Titor to an extent. In 2036, we're going to see, that we don't have time travel. And I guess that'll be the time when maybe it's finally put to rest.
Hey, I don't know. If quantum is in full force by 2036, who knows what we have, baby? Who knows?
That's true. And that's the beauty of the way the story was structured for me, is that right out of the gate, you sort of dispel the idea that if something doesn't happen, the answer is, well, it's a different timeline. Of course it didn't happen. And that's why when the dates all shifted, right? And I don't want to dive too deep into this part because I don't have all the dates on top of my head, but you look at the civil unrest, and that can be kind of equated to the most recent elections between 2018, 2020, 2016 obviously was a marquee one. We had a lot of riots and stuff throughout the last 8 years all over the place. There's been questions. I got to be careful on some of the words I use here because YouTube doesn't like them, but there's been some questions about the way elections were conducted, and a lot of those things. There's been outbreaks, right? We talked about mad cow disease in the Titor story, and a lot of that stuff can be aligned to something the stuff that's been happening here in the last 8 years, 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. So that's why I always loved about the original story is that you can chalk it all up, or at least the original creator decided that I know that there's going to come a point where this lore kind of gets dispelled because it doesn't happen. Well, now I'm just chalking it up to another timeline. And I thought that was kind of a creative use in an era where now when you look at pop culture, you've got, the Marvel Cinematic Universes spanning across multiverses. You've got, I'm a big fan of the Arrow TV shows, but you have the Arrow, the Flash, Legends of Tomorrow. They did their whole multiverse concept there. This idea of these multiverses is pop culture now. Everybody knows what it is. Everyone has a rough understanding of what it is. Back in the early 2000s, I don't think anybody would have any idea what that is. If you're the average person on the street, they'd look at you you had 10 heads. So somebody had to have that wherewithal, that either background in technology or science, or just a background in really just enjoying comic book lore where they can kind of extrapolate some of those ideas and apply it to something that seems a little more scientific.
Yeah, it's definitely similar to the common perception of multiverses. But I wanted to focus on the science. And so I focused on these micro black holes, or as John Titor called them, singularities. And I did reach out to Dr. Michio Kaku. And it was back in 2004. So this is a year after I first read about Titor. I reached out on Michio Kaku's website, and he wasn't a huge celebrity like he is today. Yeah. And he actually responded to my email pretty quick. Maybe one day later, he responded. And I asked him, I don't know if you've heard about John Titor or not, but he claims to be a time traveler, and his time machine consists of 2 micro black holes, mini black holes, singularities, he calls them. I said, based on the time machine itself, and I know you're an expert on black holes, what is your opinion of this time machine? Could it function? Is it possible? And Michio Kaku said, I think the person you mentioned is fake. Many black holes do not have the power to bend time. And that's an exact quote from Dr. Michio Kaku. He said they don't have gravitational pull. They pretty much cease to exist after a few seconds. But even if you could have one stable, it's not going to bend a laser like you see in the cigar laser photo. It's not going to bend anything. It's too small. It's, I guess, like a piece of antimatter, and it kind of disappears. But it's not as scary as Dr. Hawking said. You know, there's a 0.000 whatever chance that CERN or the LHC will create a black hole, but it's such a small percentage. And even if they do create a black hole, it's just going to disappear after a second. You know, it's not going to destroy anything. But there's always that fear, and you saw that in the headlines. Oh, the world can be destroyed if they accidentally create a black hole.
Yep.
It never happened. They've never even been close. You know, they're just trying to bombard particles together, and they've yet to do that. But I thought that was a really cool insight that I never thought about. Michio Kaku, he knew exactly how a mini black hole would act if you were to contain them somehow. And he said they wouldn't bend time. And I thought that was pretty cool. I got a response from him.
That's wild.
Yeah. I was just going to say, how about the fact that you got a response from Dr. Michio Kaku? I mean, that is cool as shit, dude.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
I wonder how quick he'd be responsive today, now that he's sort of in every documentary that has anything to do with anything science or French science. Now he's blown up in popularity. That's wild.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You alluded a couple times in our discussion about Larry Haber to the person that's really behind it and not stepping out into the spotlight. I think it's as good a time as any right now. Do you have an inclination as to who that person might be?
Yeah. Back 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that, I said it was, I guess for the first time I mentioned it was 2011. But that video didn't blow up as much as the video entitled The Smoking Gun Proof, John Titor is Maury Haber.
Yep.
And I still think it's Maury Haber to this day. I just think he played an initial original author role, and I think he stepped away. And the connection between the Habers, even Larry Haber's son was on the time travel forums, and he was saying, "Oh," and this is this Larry Haber's son saying, "You know, I think it's this person, that person." He's given his opinions, but I think he was obviously trying to pull people away from his Uncle Maury. And when I posted my video, I thought it was interesting that Larry's response was, "Oh, this is a video about me." So Larry kind of sees Titor as himself, which is interesting, or at least he wants people to think Titor is him. And the entire video was me just doing research on Titor, and a random Haber brother came forward and started emailing me out of the blue. His name is Arthur Haber.
Okay.
And Arthur said, you know, my nephew's really smart. It could be him. He said, my brother Maury is actually a computer securities expert. It could be him, but he was leaning more in the direction of his nephew, Brandon. And I said it couldn't have been Brandon because in 98, Brandon was like 8 years old or 9 years old or something. That's too young to be faxing our bell.
Yeah.
And that letter is too sophisticated to be coming from an 8 or 9 year old. And he told me, and his nephew's going into rocketry, and I think he has become like a rocket scientist to an extent. So he is a very smart kid. But I still don't think he played an original role. He might have later in 2001 helped his uncle write about it, or maybe he even encouraged his uncle. So it could have been a family project, and I don't know. But most definitely Larry and Brandon have protected Maury if it was him. And there was a documentary from, I believe, Italy, and it could have been Spain or Italy. And a friend on MySpace, and that's how far back it was, on MySpace, he translated this TV show for me. And he told me what they said, because it's all in Italian. And he said they think it's either Larry or Richard. because Richard followed his brother Larry Haber around the whole set, or during filming the whole time, and the TV show hired a Florida PI, private investigator named Mike Lynch, and Mike Lynch thought he was either Larry or his brother Rick, and Arthur told me it's not Rick, it's not. Just leave Rick alone. Rick literally has nothing to do with it. And he gave me details about Rick, which I can't repeat. But Rick is a kind guy, a nice guy. He's an totally innocent guy. He was just literally curious about the TV show aspect.
Right.
And I seriously doubt it had anything to do with Rick. So I can't ever say it's Rick. I'm 100% convinced Rick was just following his brother's lead. He was fascinated with the process of how a TV show is made and stuff like that.
There's a lot of Haber brothers.
Yeah, there are
I was
many.
thinking the same thing.
They're a big family.
There's so many that I don't know because I've never done any private investigation on the family. I like
Right.
to keep things professional. I'm just talking about John Titor. And Arthur would email me this and this and this, and I would say, you know what, I want to focus on this time travel thing, not any personal family stuff. I'm keeping that 100% out of my video.
Sure.
That's awesome.
investigation. And that's
Smart
what I
move.
did. And so in the emails, you might see blacked out, and that blacked out stuff is just personal stuff I didn't want because it has nothing to do with the investigation. You know?
Right. And it's potentially setting yourself up some kind of defamation or something like that. So that's a smart move. John, question for you, right? As it pertains to the nephew, and I thought that was really interesting when I was watching your video and realizing that the nephew would have been like 8, 9 years old at that point in time. Now, in the John Titor story, there's a woman, Pamela, that had direct communication with the supposed John Titor. Do you, and I don't remember, this is a question for both of you guys, did they have a phone conversation? Do you guys recall that? Or am I making that up?
Well, I did email Pamela back and forth asking her if I can interview her a
Yeah.
couple times
Mm-hmm.
this was like back in 2010, 2011, 2012 or something. And she finally agreed to do an email interview. But as far as she did a private chat with John Titor. I know that, like a IRC type chat.
Right.
And I don't know if she ever had a phone call, but it's possible. She's kept a couple things back on purpose because she wants to know who's the real cheater, who's not.
Right.
So she's kept a few things.
Right. Well, look, she was intricately involved. I'm not necessarily saying an accomplice, but she's a big part of the story. And I could be way off base here, but I feel like I recall that there was a phone conversation, maybe more than once, between her and John. And the reason why I bring that up is, and now granted, if she didn't, then this narrative is blown up. But if she did, I mean, you would know that you're speaking to an 8-year-old kid, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So if that's the case, right, like that kind of blows the cover on it being the nephew anyway. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe they didn't have a phone conversation. Maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly. It's been a long time, but...
A conversation that she would have had with Titor would have been 2000, 2001, which would make him, 11 years old? That's still way too young.
Yeah.
I have a very high-pitched voice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My son sounds like Mickey Mouse right now. He's 12, so...
I do remember that too, though. I remember, again, this is probably second or third hand information because we came into this story probably around 2003 as well and on and off throughout the years. But I also remember seeing in certain spots that there was some, I guess, suspicion, if you will, that Pamela did have some phone conversations, that he was regularly in touch with John. And Tim, you sort of, I thought you were going to steal my thunder here a little bit with where I wanted to go with this, and you kind of did.
Good.
But my thought was always that if she did have a phone conversation, I wonder if anyone hasn't presented her a voice of Maury Haber or a voice sample of any of the other people that have claimed to be John Titor, one of which is Joseph Matheny. I think if she did have those phone conversations, it might be pretty easy to just hear that voice, since it was such an integral part of her life at that time, and just like click and be that sort of definitive moment. Again, maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I don't know how much she's still involved with the story, if she's tracked it. I assume, John, that when you spoke to her, did you echo your theory on Maury to her?
Yeah, she saw my Maury theory, and she reacted by saying, wow, it definitely could have been him.
Okay,
And then
interesting.
I asked her, is there any connection that you could possibly provide me. She said that John Titor mailed her the 5100 label, but in addition to mailing her that, years later, John Titor supposedly mailed her the John Titor book. You know, that book. She said both the letter with the 5100 IBM label, which is an antique label, you know, and the book, she said both came from Florida. That's all she was willing to tell me.
Right.
So the Habers live in Florida, both of them coming from Florida. That's pretty interesting. And she said the book was transcribed, I think, from the mother or something to that effect. So that's interesting. So that ties the mother with whoever published the book directly. She did write the foreword. She has like her own chapter in the book. And so, I mean, I'm pretty sure the Habers have been tied to the website that did have the book up there for a short few months.
Right.
They didn't sell too many copies. It was like a one run. It was one run, and it's basically just what's online plus the chapter about the mom is the only new information in that book.
Right. What was sort of that smoking gun moment, that light bulb moment, if you will, that you decided, like, this is definitively Maury?
Well, I mean, it gets down to some details that I've never shared, to be honest.
Okay.
See, I researched and researched and researched. I would get tips from many different sources, and I ignored all the tips because I consider them just someone leading me astray, you know. They're like, oh, it's this person, it's that person. I got so many tips. And one of the tips was like, check out Larry's Facebook. And I'm like, I don't want to go to anyone's Facebook. I'm not going to focus on anyone's personal social media. I'm going to focus on Googling obscure things. And then my haters would say, oh, you just Google. You're good at Googling. But, you know, I Googled for 1,000 hours. I mean, it wasn't casual Googling. It was really deep diving to an extreme degree. And I must have saw a link of Larry's brothers on Google, and I casually just looked at the list. I'm not looking at any details on anything out of the unusual. I was just looking for John Titor specifically. This must have been before Arthur contacted me. Yeah, so the first time I guessed and came to the conclusion based on evidence that he was Maury, I saw Maury's face as just a cartoon. See, all of Larry's brothers, and there are many brothers, I don't know how many brothers there are, but all of his brothers had a regular profile face, no big deal, except for Maury. Maury was the only one with a cartoon face, and it wasn't a regular cartoon face. It was someone trying to hide and not show. This is a computer securities expert. He knows that Facebook has this facial recognition software. He knows all about all that stuff, even back then. And so I think he was paranoid enough to put up a cartoon instead of his real face. And the cartoon was a hacker hacking on a computer. And that was it. It was kind of like you see a beware of deer crossing type of a sign. But instead of a deer crossing, it was a silhouette of a computer hacker hacking on a computer. And that was Maury Haber's avatar. And I didn't see that through going to Facebook. I think I saw it straight on a Google search. And I was like, wow, that's unusual. I mean, if John Titor was one of his brothers, he would have, it seems too good to be true. So what I did was hundreds of hours of searching Maury Haber's blog. He had a blog on his computer securities, EI Security, at the time he worked for that company. I think he works for a similar company or the same company. They might have changed their name. And so back then it was EI Security. And he sounded like Titor. I went through all of his blog posts. I cross-referenced them. I just wanted to see if their phrases match. And they did, from my perspective. And I used I used an application called WCopyFind, which was a free plagiarism test. Not that he plagiarized, but I wanted to see if he was so close in the handwriting that it could be proven scientifically. And even the creator of WCopyFind, he said he created it to prove if his students are cheating. That's why he created the software, and it's free. And I emailed the creator, and he said, yeah, you could definitely do a reverse engineering way to find an author that's anonymous. He said that's a possibility. And so I found 7-word phrases that matched, 6-word phrases, 5, 4, 3-word phrases. But it was more specifically the individual words and how he used them. The one that sticks out to me is the word infrastructure. And when you hear the word infrastructure, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word infrastructure? Like you, what comes to mind when you hear that word? Just asking.
Tim, you're leaning in like you're going to say something.
I was gonna give the stupidest answer ever because that's my role. Bridge. I don't know why. But the word bridge comes to mind.
Bridges, roads. Yeah. I mean, I'm an information tech. I work in IT, so for me, an infrastructure is a computer network. So that's where I would go first. So that's why I wanted to let Tim go first. I think that's more maybe where you were going.
I'm a dummy, so I don't go that route.
Well, I think an IT person would go the computer route, and a non-IT person would go the bridges and buildings and just infrastructure of a city route. And that's what I go towards. I go towards the city route, the city buildings and roads and bridges and that. And so both John Titor and Maury Haber exclusively only use the word infrastructure when they're talking about the inside of a computer. Both of them only use it in that context. So both of them must be into computer IT, that type of a field. And it was more than that. I went as far as, they both are fans of IBM. Both of them, John Titor never mentions Apple or Macintosh once. He never mentions it a single time. He never mentions iPhones, which didn't exist at the time. He doesn't mention any of that. And Maury Haber's only mention of Apple and Mac is saying they have vulnerabilities, and he didn't like Apple and Mac, and he would only, as a computer securities expert, he would give tips on how to protect your computer from this and that. But I found many phrases. To this day, no one says it's a smoking gun, but it's a smoking gun to me. It's a field called text-based forensic linguistics, and there are ABC agencies that are doing that to this day to find people online. Find the bad guys, and so they're not doing it for hoaxes. They're not doing it for pranks. They're using it to find some serious potential criminals out there, and it's a field that does have you can master in it to this day. It's a brand new field. You can get a master degree in it, but at the time when I was doing it, it wasn't even it wasn't something you could go to school and learn. It was kind of a secret little tool that they used to find potential criminals. And so I think I found the linguistic fingerprint on a text-based level between these two individuals, and I think they're the same person. I think Maury eventually stepped away, and his brother Larry took over the reins, and he did it from an entertainment perspective, I think.
I want to really underscore, too, because when people hear Googling, right, they said you were a great Googler. At the time that you were probably this great Googler, quote unquote, I think maybe that's looked at as a slight, but I don't think people realize Google 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago is not the same Googling as today, right? And what you're talking about, like with linguistic software and trying to trace this fingerprint and mapping two different texts to one another, it's not the same as it is today. Back then, I remember taking full courses in high school and then in college on how to be a better Googler. Like you'd use pluses and quotations, you would use minuses, like you'd use operators to control your search and the results that would come out. It was a legitimate resume skill to be a good Googler that would separate you from a lot of other people because of how intricate it was. And the results weren't necessarily marred with so many advertisements, and it wasn't as curated. It was raw results. And so when you say that, I think of that as like the highest honor somebody could have said, like, you're a good Googler, and then spending thousands of hours going through that. That's an honor to me. I don't know that people today, maybe some of them do, maybe some that don't, that are listening to this can respect that in the same way. The other thing too is in comparing texts, I think we look at that differently because we see it on TV shows, right? And it's so easy in there. They just put in two documents and it scans it through and it points it out. It's certainly not that level of sophistication here. There is a lot of work that goes into it. But also today with like AI tools, we can do a lot of that stuff exponentially faster than probably what you were doing at the time. And so to find key phrases, like when you say 7 key phrases, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but to find 7 phrases that match between a limited number of effectively blog posts, right? They're responses on forums to actual blog posts. It's a pretty good hit rate when you consider the amount of text that's out there on the internet and the sequence that words can actually be in. I'd be curious, and I know you stepped away from this at this point, and so maybe this is just a challenge for anybody else out there that's still interested in this, is run the same stuff through some of the AI tools today and see if maybe there's something else that might have been missed. And maybe, John, you'll get reinvigorated here and want to jump back on the bandwagon to help verify or unverify some of your previous research. But I'm curious if anybody else out there has even tried to utilize those tools and see if they can reinforce what you've already found.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea. I have used the AI computers like ChatGTP and Grok. I've used both of them for different research I'm doing on different cases, different subjects, and they're fairly accurate. They occasionally will put out some hallucinations.
Yes, that's the problem.
That's the problem. So you have to cross-reference what they're telling you, but they're pretty good at, they can read like 1,000 words and really give you details on those 1,000 words. So I can definitely input that and see if I can find any more evidence. Like the W copy find I used, I ran it hundreds of times. So it would tell me, you know, there's a 70% chance they're the same person. There's a 60% chance. I think I got as high as 85% chance they're the same person. But it has to be, of course, there has to be a blind test. You have to do it with different subjects,
right,
to get a more accurate scientific response. I mean, percentage, I understand that. And so there's more research that can be done. That's definitely a good idea.
So John, as it pertains to this forensic linguistics text-based stuff, right, which I not only am I not an expert, but I have zero experience in that at all whatsoever. But you mentioned that there are 7-word and 6-word phrases that match, which seem to the untrained mind, right, as in mine, I go, wow, well, that's pretty. I mean, what are the odds statistically that 2 different people would use the same 7-word phrase, 6-word phrase? Like, to me, that's some pretty good proof that, hey, it's the same author. I guess my question is, though, and if you don't know the answer, that's okay, but do you recall what any of the phrases were? And the reason why I asked that, were they like common phrases that most folks would use? Or was it like something very, I don't want to say off, or was it something more uncommon?
Well, I used to have them publicly up, and it's on my Google Drive to this day. It's still there, but Google Drive just made it private just randomly one day. Google Drive just makes old Google Drives private, so I can make it public again. I do have like 1,000 people asking for access to it, and to be honest, most of these individuals asking are Russian, because I get I get emails. I'm getting emails into my Gmail, and they have Russian names. So this John Titor story must be blowing up in Russia, because someone must have translated it. There must be videos over there talking about it, and I'm happy to make it public again.
Oh, that's interesting.
The phrases that were 7, I might have even got an 8 or 9.
Wow.
Were very, very common. We're like, it's just regular talking, like, and so this happened and that happened and that happened, and so I could look for more details. Like, everyone has their own go-to phrase that they put between 2 sentences.
Right.
I could search for those go-to phrases and see if they match exactly and stuff like that. I think Maury was writing from the perspective of a Stephen Hawking type character he created, and on his blog he's a little more casual, but he still talks in that professional, scientific perspective. He still talks very similarly, and the bigger the phrase, the more common the words are. That's why I kind of focused on the small ones, but
makes sense.
I'm happy to release that and make it public again.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
One of the other names that's popped up quite a bit in the the lore of John Titor is Joseph Matheny, who has been a guest on our show, but that was for Ong's Hat, a story that he created, and to this day people still think is true, even though he's admitted 1,000 times that it is not. He had to change his address, basically strike his identity, his locations off the internet, because people were coming to his house and like threatening him to get a hold of this egg that was part of the story of Ong's Hat. And so it was a really fascinating conversation we had with him on that. In the research to that episode, Ong's Hat was near dear to us because it's in New Jersey. It's about 30 minutes from where we live. So we were hooked on the idea that this story like kind of took hold. And he was a character in his own story. But in the research for that kind of led us down a path that he has, I guess, admitted in some contexts that he was John Titor. It's certainly not verified, and the story that he's presented, it's not something that was on our show, and it's not something that we've kind of approached with him since. But the story that he presented was that he did this with a group of his friends, and each of them had different backgrounds, one of which worked in Hollywood, and other people had specific roles that he just didn't want to invalidate their trust in releasing their names. I assume that in the midst of your research, you probably crossed that bridge at some point. If you did, what led you away from that and still focus towards Maury?
Well, I said it was Maury in 2011, and I kept getting tips and emails and messages from many, many individuals, fans, whatever the case, just people who watch my content. And the first time I ever heard of this Joseph guy, someone who's big into the John Titor stuff, they said, hey, this Joseph guy, it's been discovered that on his LinkedIn, he admits to John Titor art project or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And I said, how'd you find this? He said, well, people found it, and it's out there, and he just admitted that he did John Titor. And so it's a done deal. He's the guy. And my immediate response was, embellishments on LinkedIn resumes is so common. I mean, people will put 20 years of references that don't exist. I mean, that's
right.
Standard. That's normal. It's how people get great jobs sometimes. I mean, unscrupulous individuals, they do that. I've never done it on my, I don't use LinkedIn that much. The last time I used it, I just showed my YouTube video. I said, I did Hoax Hunter, I did this, I did that, and then I haven't used it for many years. But
you're not missing out, trust me.
Yeah. My response was, I just think it's an embellishment, unless he has some evidence to back it up besides saying I did it. I knew it wasn't the character of the actual person behind John Titor. Mm-hmm. The person behind John Titor is so secretive. He won't admit even when an anime uses the name in a popular anime, Steins Gate, over in Japan. They have a character named John Titor in Steins Gate. Yep. And I think it's a female character, but they obviously got it from the John Titor lore, and they were fascinated by that over in Japan. And it's blown up worldwide. And so it's famous. It's too famous for someone to casually drop in their LinkedIn that, hey, I did it, by the way. That's not good enough. I did it, by the way. I think it's possible he leaked. I think he leaked someone else leaking him leaking it. And I think it's a PR stunt from the get-go. And my number one question back then was, where's the box? But my number one question right now, I guess, is there any evidence that this Joseph guy did Ong's Hat? I mean, you know more about Ong's Hat than me concerning him. Is there any evidence he actually did Ong's Hat? I know what Wikipedia says, but the first time I heard of Ong's Hat was in the Montauk Project books back in the 90s. Yep. So back in the 90s, I read all the Montauk Project books. I was huge into the possibility of time travel. I was still a big Back to the Future fan, but I was a big Montauk Project fan to the point where I communicated with Preston B. Nichols, the author.
Really?
I only communicated online.
Yeah.
He posted on the official, as official gets. It's kind of the unofficial official forums. They only existed in, I think, 1999 and the year 2000, and I think 99 and 2000. And so I stopped being interested in 2001, the exact time John Titor was really posting. So I didn't see that. I didn't even know Art Bell had a post-to-post forum. It was something he never plugged. So I thought that was interesting. I missed out on post-to-post. That was a short-lived forum right there.
Yeah, that would have been cool to be on.
But do you have any evidence that this Joseph guy created Ong's hat? Because in the Montauk Project book, it was a thing I think Preston B. Nichols said was a local hoax that people made Xerox copies and posted them around town, type of a thing.
Yeah.
But is there any hard evidence that this Joseph guy actually did that hoax, or did he take credit for it?
For Ong's hat, there's significant evidence that he did it. So it was just that. It was a role-playing game, and he had been a part of a group of creators. It's not the same group that he says that would have done John Titor with him. Again, if you wanted to believe that angle of the story. But basically, they were creating these role-playing games, and they would mail them out. And so he's got all the original transcripts. He's got all original documentation, his trajectory through the story. He's got mailing lists that he would mail them out. And when they created the Ong's Hat version of the game, I mean, he was within that episode, he was telling us the resources of where he was getting some of the science from. Like, he was a big fan of, I completely forget the researchers' names now, but there was research projects that were actually going on at Princeton University, and there was papers being published, and then under pseudonyms, some of those professors published those papers. He was big fans of those, and he was telling us where to find them, to pull up that information. He knew a lot about the inner workings of the story. For all intents and purposes, outside of the fact that Joseph Matheny was also a character within Ong's Hat, right? And so he was actually going out and speaking as the character, which he uses his real name in. But it is his real name. He has a background in technology, which at the time when Ong's Hat was popularized, everyone thought he was just a reporter. And so he was just or an investigative reporter. And so he was doing these interviews under that persona, but he was actually had a background in IT cybersecurity. And he kept his real identity private until he decided he was done with it. But it was just a common role-playing game that sort of took a life on its own. And then he said started getting adopted and planted in, and then the story kind of blown up. And he talked about the lines between his story and then the lore that was built around it. Of course, could just be claiming ownership of that. I think I'm not going to speak for you, but I think coming out of that conversation, I would have almost zero doubt in my mind that he was behind it. Just the depth of knowledge and talking one-on-one too, and like seeing the person and asking him questions that he was not necessarily prepared for. There was no real reluctance. Answers seemed consistent with the research that we had done previously. And he's not really trying to monetize it outside of there. Like there's been no incentive for him to make any money off of it. It's just a fun thing he does on the side. And he's generally not a conspiracy person. That's one of the things he talked about us quite a bit before, after, and even during that episode, was just a lot of stuff he doesn't really believe in. And he finds it fun. He's interested in the fantasy aspect. He's interested in like the idea of exploration, going out and doing stuff. But the idea of conspiracy to him is just like, people are getting too crazy about it. So we didn't talk to him much about the Titor thing. We casually mentioned it offline that, we had heard this, and he kind of laughed and talked to us a little bit privately, just about some base things. We said, it's a conversation for another day, and, alluded to the fact that there is a documentary coming out, which you and I had spoke about a little bit on Twitter as well. And that he had other things going on that he was working on that would potentially lead more to this. And so I don't know. I didn't have a long enough conversation with him, or we didn't really, that I can disseminate if the Titor thing is real or not, or maybe it was just a convenient piggyback off of the Titor or the Ong's Hat story. Because again, you have a history now of doing this, assuming you believe that aspect. The Habers stuff to me has always been interesting, right? Because like you alluded to before, you go and you start filing trademarks for all this stuff. The guy's an entertainment lawyer. Like that stuff adds up. I don't know that you found the story and maybe you just wanted to capitalize it, which I think is totally plausible, but that you held it for so long and like we're sort of playing this like, I don't want to say dummy role. It's not what I mean, but like you're just playing kind of stoic that like, oh yeah, I know who he is, but I can't tell you type thing. And then finding your discovery then into Maury also raises some questions too, because I think the big knock on Haber the whole way through is that like you need a certain degree of technical background, an interest in fantasy and science fiction to really be able to piece a lot of these things together. You weren't just going and watching Back to the Future and coming up with a lot of these answers to some of the technical questions that came up. That's why I've always sort of walked the line a little bit on like, I don't know who I believe. And I've never, until literally the Alongside episode, I never even heard Matheny's name mentioned in relation to Titor. It was always Haber. And so that's why I wasn't even sure, like you've been way more research than this, if that even came up to you in your time. And it sounds like it was after the fact, really. So it's fascinating to me that it's come up, and it's just, I don't think it's been widely accepted, but it's been in certain wings of the internet, it's been accepted, and just sort of like no follow through has come up. Don't know.
Well, it was too big of a story when he came forward using anonymous sources who happened to stumble upon his LinkedIn page.
Right.
It was too convenient. I mean, it was too big of a story. It would be like if just pick a random person who was of age in the 70s putting on their LinkedIn, oh, by the way, I did the Necronomicon book, Simon Necronomicon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too famous to just say I did it. You have to provide
You have
some
to prove
proof.
Yeah.
And so my number one question back when he claimed he did it was, do you have at least a photograph of the time machine, like a better photograph, not some cropped little tiny. Obviously, they cropped it and made it as small as possible, so you can't see any evidence. You can't really even see what's going on. But he has to have access to the actual prop itself. You're not going to throw away a prop like that. It's a pretty cool military-looking prop.
Yep.
Right.
And where is it? Is there even a new photograph he can provide? He can't provide anything.
Yeah, he claimed, I think it was a friend that was doing special effects, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
When we spoke with him, this was not on air. He does claim that he has other photos of it, but to the best of my knowledge, he's never made that public.
Mm-hmm. See, I have more photos of it too. It's in my garage right now. See, I'm John Titor. I did it.
Well, you already said it, dude. You said you were John Titor.
Yeah. And that's something where, I'd be curious if I could absolutely just reach out to him again too and see, if he'd want to have a discussion on this. I don't know how that aligns with this documentary, you're part of this documentary as well. I guess let's parlay right into that. You're part of this documentary as well, that you've recorded 4 hours or something, you said?
Yeah, they easily recorded me for 4.5 hours, but I know they're going to cut me down to like 5 minutes tops. They might cut me down to 30 seconds. I don't know.
I hope not, because I think there's a lot here to just unravel. Because apparently Larry Haber's part of this documentary as well. Do you know that? Do you know who else is part of this or no?
Well, Jay Cheel, he... I signed a couple documents. I probably signed NDAs. I don't know, But
Well, do not get yourself in trouble. Don't get us in trouble either.
I did sign that they can use my YouTube videos. So they might
awesome.
show a few seconds of my YouTube videos. I think they're going to focus more on my entertaining ones. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're going to make me a goofball in it. I don't care. I don't mind what angle they have it.
Sure.
But Jay Cheel is going to come up with his own conclusion, and it might be totally different from mine. He just wanted my perspective on the Maury Haber side, and I know he did interview this Joseph guy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. That's why I just call him Joseph.
Matheny.
Hey,
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe we'll get lucky and Jay will use this podcast in his documentary. Jay, use us, buddy. Go ahead. You have rights. Use it.
I mean, I don't know who I'm allowed to say is in it, but
Yeah, that's true.
Larry
Bad
Haber
question to ask you directly.
So Larry Haber's in it.
Yeah.
Larry Haber's been in, I think, all of his time travel documentaries, and so I'm sure they're friends to an extent. Larry's happy to, say, oh. All I can say is Larry plays the game of, ooh, we don't know if it's real or not. Ooh.
Right.
And he 100% knows. But even to this day, he'll play the game of maybe yes, maybe no, we don't. And that's what it bothers me a little bit. He's not the legal spokesperson from it anymore, but he likes to play the old, ooh, I don't know, it could be. And
Right.
In the documentary, he may or may not provide some more evidence. And I could just say I'm just not impressed by the new evidence. I'm not impressed, but it's still going to be entertaining for fans of John Titor. So I recommend you check it out when it comes out.
Yeah.
I think
Unequivocally.
I don't know if it's going to come out through Amazon, but it might be connected to Amazon Prime Video. It might be connected to that. And people ask me, when's it coming out? And I said he's been working on it for years, and he has, because he showed me a Larry clip from a couple years ago. And it's brand new, and I've never seen it. So I don't want to reel too much.
Sure.
Yeah.
there's a guy that wrote a book on John Titor. I can't remember his name. He has a fake name and he's anonymous. And Jay Cheel even interviewed that guy about Titor. And,
I wonder how you find a person like that.
An anonymous person.
I'm surprised this guy showed his face. So he's wearing sunglasses, and you get to see what he looks like, though, for the first time, this anonymous guy. And this anonymous guy, I can't remember his name, but he followed my coattails back on the time travel forums. And he said, oh, this Razimus guy isn't an expert. I'm an expert. And he was brand new and just registered that day. And he claimed to be an expert on day one. So this guy, he's a character. But I don't think he's an expert personally. I think he's just a fan and read through the John Titor posts.
Right.
And his like second post was "Ask me anything." It's like, what? We don't want to. We don't care.
I'm an expert on John Titor. Ask me anything. Post number 2. I like that. And then here's my book within probably the same 6 months. That's always a good tell of who's legitimate and who's not, isn't it?
Do you think Larry still portrays that whole persona, if you will, of like maybe it's real, maybe it's not? Do you think there's still hopes of potential financial gain there, or do you think he just this story is so big he just wants to continue it?
Well, I think it's one of the more exciting things in his life, and he knows that'll die down if he proves one way or the other. I think he just likes the fandom. I think he sees people being fans of John Titor as being fans of him. He associates himself that much to it that I don't think he'll ever reveal anything. He's happy to play the game. He does reveal something in the documentary, and it's interesting. It's definitely new information. So I would be interested in checking it out. I want to see it myself.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
To come out.
Yeah. And you know, that's building on what you just asked him too, is if this documentary now comes out and it ends up being a hit, that could now, you know, spur a whole bunch of different angles to take this. That will be the tell, right?
100%.
Because if this does, now you actually have somebody that's attached that's created horror movies and he's in Hollywood already, Jay Cheel. So, well, you're not you watch a good amount of horror movies, but the
I love horror
VHS,
movies.
some of those series, so like he's created some of those. But now you've got somebody that has direct ties that if this documentary goes well, he can be the one to facilitate a real movie. Then all of a sudden, whoever's behind this sees somebody's pockets getting lined, and I think that might be an interesting time where a lot of evidence is going to spill out onto the floor saying, hey, by the way, and that evidence might not be the original evidence. We're going to see that car reproduced real quick and rolled out of somebody's storage shack to some degree.
Well,
so,
dude, we've talked about it for years. Like, we're shocked that there hasn't been something in Hollywood made of this John Titor story.
It absolutely blows my mind.
It's a phenomenal
Absolutely blows my
story.
mind.
I mean,
Yeah.
how that hasn't been adapted into something is fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Even Jay Cheel asked me, is it an interesting story? Would you like to see it? And I said, yeah, I think it's interesting. They should make a movie about it. I think it's pretty cool.
And if you wanted to go like the TV series route, this is for you, Jay Cheel. If you're out there watching this and you wanted to make a TV series about it, right? Like I can't help but think like in the Sliders mindset, you don't have to necessarily be that, but, they did like I want to say 12 Monkeys, but for some reason I'm thinking 13 Monkeys, but I think it's 12 Monkeys. They did a movie with Bruce Willis, but then they later did a TV show, which I thought was so good. And it was a time travel one, but they showed like the war and the hellscape that was of the future. And then they basically travel back into the past to fix it, right? And they show the impacts that their fixes make on the future. So like just adapting that basic theme into, and we're in a time and era too where you don't have to have a 25 episode series on anything anymore, especially if you go on a streaming network, but you do like a 7 to 10 episode season, maybe you do 2 or 3 of them, and you could build a TV show out of that. You could just be printing money out on this story because there's so much. The lore itself is one piece of it, but then just adding on your own pieces for the future and the impact that it has, just there's so many opportunities there.
Dude, nobody watches more TV than you. You watch more TV
all day, man.
than anyone I know.
It's sometimes miraculous that I get work done
It
to
is.
the degree I get it done. It's really crazy.
And shit TV,
running
by
multiple
the way.
businesses.
You watch terrible
No,
programs.
that's such a good show. I
Oh
watch so
my
many good
God.
shows. I watch some shitty TV, but I
Oh,
also
you
watch
watch a
some good
lot of
stuff, too.
shitty TV, dude.
It's a good balance. It's a good balance.
I've
one-
seen 12 Monkeys. I've seen
Yeah,
the movie
good.
many times, and I'm a big fan of the movie. I heard about the show, but I haven't seen it, so I'll check it out.
Check it out. Yeah, it was good. It was short-lived, maybe 3 seasons or so. I think it was on Sci-Fi Channel, so a little bit nerfed, but I really enjoyed it. I thought they did a really good job with it. I came from the movie too, and I'm always a big fan of, like, when you make a movie, if they make a spin-off TV show, I'm going to check it out. Or even like reboots. Like I've rebooted. I watched the reboot of Quantum Leap, which I've really enjoyed. I want to reboot of Sliders. I'm a big fan of that show. Any of those sci-fi stuff. I don't mind the cheesiness. It's fun. It's an escapism a little bit. I want to ask you one other name that we didn't bring up here, and then maybe we'll bring this home. Oliver Williams. From what I remember, he's the one that created JohnTitor.com. It hasn't been updated in forever. I've tried to actually reach out and say, like, I work in this space, so I would say I'll gladly take over the website, run it for him, update it, just try to keep the legacy alive, because I'm always so concerned that it'll disappear, and it's still my go-to source to go back and read all of those original posts. I don't know that he's been around for many years. I don't know how to contact him. I don't know that anybody's contacted him. But I know at one point or another, he was also in the suspect list. I never really saw any evidence that sort of alluded to the fact that he really was a suspect outside of just a big fan. Did you ever have any interaction with him, engagement? Do you ever know where maybe he stood on this whole thing?
I definitely, chatted with him, emailed, or maybe just through the forums back and forth a few times here and there. Nothing major, but he definitely was an interesting figure. He always wanted to be anonymous. No one knows if that's his real name. Jay Cheel might know more about Oliver Williams than me. Jay Cheel has a pretty extensive list of who's who on the John Titor story, and he might have more details than me. I don't know if Jay ever interviewed him, but he has been on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, and I think possibly with George Norrie as well. And the most suspicious thing I remember with Oliver Williams was he's in the middle of a Coast to Coast AM interview, and I think it's George Norrie asks him, or it could have been Art Bell, but I'm pretty sure it's George at that point, asks him, "Oh, you can plug the website. What's the website again?" And then Oliver Williams turns and he asks someone what the website is, and they tell him, "Oh, JohnTitor.com." And he's, "Oh yeah, JohnTitor.com," or whatever. And I was like, "Wow, that's weird."
That is weird.
Wouldn't he know his own website?
Right.
I mean, so that's the most suspicious thing I remember concerning Oliver.
Maybe
He
Larry
never shows his face.
Yeah, maybe Larry and Maury were sitting next to him.
Yeah, who knows? No one knows to this day. It's interesting. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, you just take somebody else, you just put him. I mean, if you don't know who he is, it's just a little. I don't want to use the word patsy, but you throw somebody in there as just a little catfish.
Yeah. Now I have to do a deep dive to see if there's any connection between him and the Maury family.
Well, we got to find that episode first and listen to that.
I'm pretty sure Oliver's website, he posted the John Titor photos of the time machine.
Yes, he did.
But,
they're on
but
there.
he made them smaller than I think the original versions. Why
They're
would he do
an
that?
impossibility to look at. It's driven me crazy for so long, because as I've been like wrapped up in this thing, right? The first thing I ever wanted to know is this true or not? Of course, deep down, you know it's not true, but you sort of want it to be true, because
we wanted it to be
as
true.
long as we want it to be true, because you love the idea, the science fiction, the idea that this, we've got time travel in the future, but also like it's fun. It's fun to. Tim says this all the time in our episodes. Sometimes you don't want to know the truth because the journey to get there is so enjoyable. And with the photos, I always wanted to look at them and I'm trying to scale them and stuff. Like, this couldn't be any smaller, or like somebody intentionally killed this photo for me. And for the life of me, of course, I can't find them anywhere else. I'm sure if I dug deep enough, I might be able to, but maybe that'll be a good intern project for the new interns next month. We'll see.
Listen,
Well, another connection with the Habers. Larry's so big into cigars and smoking cigars that he hangs out at a cigar joint like every week. He has his own custom. He has like his own seat, and he has a little John Titor thing in there, and you'll see that in the documentary. It's kind of interesting. And then there's the famous cigar laser bending photo.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure you could.
That's strange.
I'm pretty sure you could prove that's Larry's hand or one of the Habers' hands. But they're big into smoking cigars, and I think it's obviously a doctored, photoshopped, where they bent the light using some Photoshop effect. But
wouldn't be very hard to do even in the early 2000s.
yeah,
I was going to say, Shane, you would know that. You're the Photoshop master.
I mean, without being, doofus teachers, but that's like seconds worth of work. You're not talking about a very difficult process.
yeah.
And it's funny because you're kind of, in this like technology loophole at that era, right? Because it's easy to say now, just we'll take a video of it instead, right? And there's this this famous TikTok account. I don't know where it is, but it's a South American country. It's not like Argentina, but it's one of those countries right around there in South America. But there's this TikToker that says he's a time traveler, and he basically has like movie rights with the city, but he goes around the city and they shut down sections of police stations and stuff, and he walks through things like that. And so it's easy to say that now, but again, in the early 2000s, you remember what our cell phones like. Text messaging wasn't even really a thing. Like you can T9 text somebody, but generally you actually still picked up the phone and called somebody, which is why it's so crazy to hear about the fax thing that was still there, but it was on its way out a little bit. So the idea of even like taking the picture, I understand that it's going to be a crap picture because our cameras were probably pretty crap still then. But the idea of trying to video something at that point, probably not everybody had a video camera that was good enough to get something that would do that. So the story gets encapsulated in the technology of the time, which is now, you know, if any of this happened, it's so much harder to pull off any sort of a prank like that, if you will. I don't know that I'm leaving this any more definitive than I was. Now I really want to know, like even more so. The Habers, I think, have always been at the top of my list of it's got to be them because it's the only ones that really make sense. And in watching all of the videos that you put together, and there is so much more, and I'll link that down below for everyone watching this on YouTube and Spotify. All the links back to John's channel there. That smoking gun video, there's so many new. I mean, you do some photos and stuff. I think it was actually an interview where, you know, the son and the brother are kind of smirking a little bit and just kind of analyze that. And I know it's anecdotal, but like the reactions to some of the questions, there's something to be said about a lot of that stuff. And when you have one or two things like that can just be, again, just circumstantial or could just be coincidence, it's nothing. You can dismiss that. But when those coincidences pile up, but you can only get like 3 or 4 coincidences before you have to say like, well, at some point this has got to stop being a coincidence and maybe there's something more to it.
Right.
And that could just be they adopted this story when it happened. Maybe that Art Bell thing was the trigger for them. Maybe that wasn't them, but they decided to go post in the forums. Maybe somebody else started posting on the forums and they just sort of took over, which is why like the tone changes a little bit in there. But I think to some degree, it's got to be true to some degree that there's somebody within that group, that family, that had some degree of involvement here.
Well, Arthur Haber, who emailed me, and the only reason I was able to show those emails is because email law, if it's unsolicited emails, you can show them publicly. That's the email law, at least. And I learned that at the time, and I was able to show them. But Arthur said the John Titor thing is a family joke. It's a family secret. You know, I could talk about it to an extent. And to him, he's disassociated, disconnected from it enough where he could give me some little details. And I think his brother was saying, you know, don't give him too much. But Arthur spilled a lot. And then after I posted my video, Arthur said, hey, you were supposed to run it by me first. He thought he had editorial rights to my investigation in my video.
Really?
And
Okay,
I said,
interesting.
no, you don't have that. So he got a bit mad, but I cut out any sensitive information. I just posted, you know, here's some pretty good evidence that the Habers are behind it.
Bizarre that he would have thought that he would have editorial rights into somebody doing essentially a very competent internet sleuth. That's very bizarre.
It's very weird.
You know, and going back to the coincidences, right? Like, okay, sure, maybe that wouldn't hold up in a court of law, but this isn't a court of law, and I like to use things called common sense. And when you look, John, at all the common sense that you put out in your videos, it's really hard to look at that and think that it's anybody else but the Habers. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, I think it's them. Maury not coming forward, he has a really big shot job. He does computer security for government agencies, I think. Mm-hmm. That's how big it is.
Government subcontractor.
So I understand he doesn't want to sully in any way, shape, or form, but my perspective was it's not illegal to have a coast-to-coast AM Art Bell prank that blows up and goes viral and becomes a worldwide phenomenon. It's a pretty cool thing. I mean,
I would think so. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So I've tried to not be negative, and I tried to say, you know, whoever did write it was very creative, very intelligent, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had half of mine to like reach out to him or even like Larry Haber at some point and be like, hey, like, would you want to talk? I feel like Larry less inclined, but I'm curious. I mean, maybe I can ask you that question. I mean, did you ever reach out to him directly and just try to say, hey, I'm just curious. I just want to ask.
Larry?
Yeah. No, Maury.
Oh, Maury? Oh, I tweeted Maury a couple times. So Maury actually tweeted me back like 5 times or something when the video first came out.
Okay.
And I said, "Are you John Titor?" And Maury's response was, "JT is not me." And so he's always gonna write from an algorithm computer perspective. He doesn't want Google to have a quote, I'm not John Titor. So he puts it in some Yoda-esque, JT is not me.
Interesting.
And I made a country music video joke. I literally wrote the song in 1 minute. I was making it up as I went along. And Maury really didn't like the video. He said, "Can you take that down?" And I said, "Okay, I'll make it private, sure." But to this day, the Habers think it's a funny video. So I did make it public recently. A couple months ago,
cool.
I made it public.
I'll have to go check that out.
It's a really bad country music. I mean, it's really bad.
Well, it's a parody. It's not supposed to be good.
It's just a joke. But I was making like memes of John Titor as Maury Haber, and Maury's like, "Don't make those memes. I don't want those to go viral." And I was like, "Okay, fine. I don't want to be."
For his professional career, I can understand that for sure.
So that's the only really direct communication from Maury to me is, please this, please that. I think he did ask me to take down the smoking gun video, and I said, "No, sorry, I can't take that down. That was a lot of work."
Yeah, that was not a short video, dude.
Yeah.
That was a lot of time and effort and research that went into that, so I don't blame you.
Yeah.
And it's not just you speaking. Like right now, we're just basically talking to the camera, right? So editing for this is going to take minutes, really, which we have an editor that does it anyway. But love you, Mauricio. But you really went through, you have different stills, you have different screens that are pulling up. Like there's a lot of editing that goes on into that video. So you're not just talking to the audience, you're cutting back and forth quite a bit. So yeah, it was a great video. Again, I'm linking that in the comment or the description below for everyone that wants to check that out.
Thank you.
With that, John, I know the John Titor era is pretty much behind you at this point, although we might have just kind of nudged you a little bit to do that analysis again with some AI tools. Are you doing any other hoax hunting? Is there anything else that's kind of sitting on the top of your list these days?
Well, the past about 11, actually at this point it's probably 13 months, I've been working on a super independent movie. And it's totally fictional. It's called Necktie Lumaton. And it's about 100 years in the future. The economy is there's some comedy in there. Sure, there's Bitcoin, but there's also this weird monetary value on certain things. And I've just been focusing on this sci-fi comedy for the past 13 months. That's it, straight. I've been working really hard on it. And it's just going to be a resume builder. I don't think it's going to make any money. It's not. It's just for art. I'm doing it for artistic reasons. And yeah, it's a passion project. It's just for fun. And so I'm focusing on this little tiny independent movie, and it's really independent. I don't know where it's going to go other than I'm just going to post it, and hopefully people enjoy it and are entertained. Awesome. But that's about all I've been working on for the past year and a couple months.
Well, you've got a direct connection to Jay Cheel here, so maybe it's a little way to kind of bump him with your shoulder, be like, hey, look, this Titor thing you did really well. You trust my opinion there. Check out this other project I'm working on. Maybe it can spur something else.
Well, Jay Cheel said that he'd be willing to voice act in my movie.
Cool. No kidding.
So I hope he keeps his word on that. I mean, he said he's going to do a little voice acting, and I said,
that's awesome.
Heck yeah. I'd be happy to have him on there.
Oh, that's really cool.
There's going to be real life scenarios, but there's going to be a lot of voice acting in the movie as well. There's going to be like fake radio stations and fake video chats and stuff like that. And,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so
if you need any extras, we got 2 guys that we'll be more than willing to volunteer. So
okay.
We're here for you. Where could people find you on the internet if you want them to find you?
It's just at Razimus on Twitter. That's pretty much it. If I have something, I'll post it in the bio. It's just at Razimus, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Excellent. And I'll post that down in the descriptions here below. I think that's it for us tonight, Tim. How do you feel coming out of this?
Look, I a little heartbroken, my friend, and I'll tell you why. And John, don't feel bad when I say that, because the John Titor story really kicked off conspiracy and mystery for Shane and I, right? I mean, we were talking about this when we were kids, right? We were teenagers when we started talking about this. And although in the back of our minds, we know that there's a 99.9% chance that it wasn't real to begin with, because it's such a fun story and something that we followed so closely, there was still that tiny little bit of opportunity of maybe this was real. And so after having that conversation with Joseph Matheny, and then discovering all the work, John, that you've did, and having this conversation, it's like, man, yeah, that didn't really happen. So
I wish it happened
yeah,
too.
right. It's fun.
Yeah,
It's fun.
yeah.
So I'm a little heartbroken, my friend.
Maybe not like the World War III, everyone getting wiped out part of it, but
the time travel.
the rest, the idea of the time travel is happening is pretty cool.
Right.
And being like so ahead of it, like, just making plans like, oh man, I got to go to Omaha, Nebraska and go get some property.
How many times did we talk about that?
New capital. We talk about it all the time. Literally,
We still joke
our
about
escape plan was down to Florida and Omaha, Nebraska. We're gonna go get property and we're gonna buy some little shack in Omaha so we have somewhere to go when the new world starts.
We still joke about it today.
That'll wrap up for us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys stopping by once again. If you're watching this on YouTube, click that subscribe button, a little like down there. Same thing on Spotify. Drop us a comment below. Conspiracyrealist.com will give you all the links to all the rest of our social media. Again, we cannot thank our special guests enough. John Hughston, Razimus, who's done extensive work. I strongly encourage you, if you are into the John Titor story, check out his videos, which are in our description below. Until next time, everyone, raise your glass to mystery. It's going to be our quote from ever now. Cocktails and conspiracies. So long, everybody.